What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. So, finishing Green Lantern Volume 1, No Fear, I was going through a lot of the Green Lantern stuff. I mean, I'm into Blackest Night right now in terms of reading. Blackest Night is amazing. Oh my God, that story is so good. Sinestro Corps War was stellar. I think Sinestro Corps War is better, but they're amazing stories. I mean, when you get to that level of storytelling, it's pretty much just easy to say they're both amazing. I mean, you're really getting into like nuanced differences. But going into Green Lantern Corps Recharge, of course, what that does is it basically focuses on the Green Lantern Corps. So like Kilowog, the new Green Lanterns who are being trained, Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner, John Stewart, but it also kind of ties into the idea of Superboy Prime still being held by the Green Lanterns. And what I initially thought about doing was just kind of saying, hey, here's what happened to Superboy Prime, yada, yada, yada. But then I also kind of realized that in DC, there are like intrinsically great stories or stories that just kind of need to be told. And Infinite Crisis is a story that I've wanted to tell. And so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to run over Countdown to Infinite Crisis. Now, what Countdown to Infinite Crisis did is it was basically like an 85-page one-shot, and it set the seeds for a lot of stories that were coming after: Project OMAC, the Rand Thanagar War, Villains United, and I don't remember the last one. I feel like the last one is the most important one, but the fact remains here that it basically just kind of set the stage for a handful of stories here and there, and it went forward with the idea of basically telling us, here are the events that led to the start of Infinite Crisis. Here's how it all kind of came together in a way that basically made something a little more cohesive. Day of Vengeance, that's the last one. There we go. I couldn't remember that last title for the life of me, but this story almost focuses exclusively on Blue Beetle, but it's done in a way that makes sense. Now, for those of you guys who were reading Justice League versus Suicide Squad, and you had a particular interest in like Maxwell Lord, and you were trying to figure out about his character where he basically kind of became a major villain, what the story does is answer those questions. I mean, well, it really kind of lays the groundwork for answering those questions, but Superboy Prime and company don't really show up until like Infinite Crisis. But again, this kind of sets the stage for things that go on. And so we might be kind of picky and choosy based on, what miniseries we do. We'll probably just stick with only a couple of them, and then we'll just jump directly into Infinite Crisis. But what this does is it initially just kind of picks up with Blue Beetle making his way into the headquarters of Checkmate. Now, because this was a countdown to Infinite Crisis, it really just kind of followed the trend of 0 Hour Crisis in Time, in the sense that 0 Hour Crisis in Time was actually a miniseries where instead of going to issues, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it started with 6 and worked its way down to a 0 issue. And that's what this little story does. It really just kind of, jumps back in time. So what we end up doing here is we basically jump back to 4 days ago. Now, of course, Ted Kord, the current version of Blue Beetle, of course, hanging out with Barbara Gordon, who again is still paralyzed following the events of The Killing Joke, again is basically alerted to the idea that somebody is funneling money, somebody's laundering money through Ted Kord's company. The issue with this is that it basically kind of is effectively bankrupting Ted Kord, and so of course this kind of leads him on a merry chase where he's trying to figure out what's going on. But again, it kind of sets the stage, because keep in mind, Infinite Crisis was billed as like the 20th anniversary of Crisis on Infinite Earths. It was one of those things where it's like, if you read any story, you got to read this one. And so Countdown was basically designed to introduce new readers. So we get this sort of tour. So we basically transition over to Booster Gold. Now, a lot of this comes out of Identity Crisis, and Identity Crisis basically dealt with a pretty severe situation with a woman named Sue Dibney. In order to keep it family friendly, we're not going to go too deep into it, but Comic Historian does have a video on it. Suffice it to say, the incident basically involved sexual assault. We'll leave it there. But in response, the memories of a lot of superheroes of almost the entire Justice League were basically wiped. And so what this did is it basically created a rift with regards to a lot of the different members, creating trust issues among them. But what Blue Beetle does is he kind of gives us this little bit of a roller coaster in terms of how he viewed himself alongside Booster Gold. Because when Booster Gold and Blue Beetle came on, they were part of Justice League International. And again, Justice League International was the reworked Justice League team following Crisis on Infinite Earths. Remember, after Crisis was over, there was no like main Justice League. There was no Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, and so on. There was no Justice League team like that. Instead, it was just the unsellables. I mean, I hate to use that term, but it was basically the characters that couldn't hold a book on their own. But it was a way for DC to basically treat the Justice League like a revolving door, introduce new superheroes that people would normally never read, give them some exposure, and then turn around and give them their own solo series if they prove to be popular. The funny thing about this was that Blue Beetle was basically, I guess really Blue Beetle and Booster Gold were kind of like the 1-2 punch of comedy on the team. And so that's one of the reasons why a lot of people really loved the two of them together, because it just kind of went together like peanut butter and jelly. belly. I mean, they were great in terms of how they functioned with one another. The problem is that after the events of Identity Crisis, Booster Gold had basically walked away from being a superhero. He said, I can't really do this anymore. Well, the problem was that all the gimmicks, all the money, all the draw and the pizzazz that went with him being Booster Gold basically went along with it. And so he was, for all intents and purposes, completely broke. Now, there were instances where he tried to kind of get back on his feet, and that's really what happens here. Booster Gold draws the attention of Blue Beetle when Booster Gold basically, draws $300 out of an ATM machine using, money that Blue Beetle has. Of course, Blue Beetle says, hey, look, we're kind of broke here, we're running on fumes in terms of cash. But Blue Beetle also says, look, somebody's embezzling money, somebody's laundering money through my company. And if there's any one person that would be most likely to do this, it would be Maxwell Lord. Now, keep in mind, Maxwell Lord was basically kind of brought in with regards to Justice League International as a guy that effectively stole leadership away from Batman. I mean, he really just kind of hijacked the team. But it was really cool because Maxwell Lord was kind of one of these characters that DC was trying to sort out. They were trying to figure out what direction they were going to take him in, and they struggled time and time again because Maxwell Lord was not inherently interesting. But what this does is kind of take his character and turn him on his head again. Now, of course, meeting with Maxwell Lord, the meeting's pretty short-lived in the sense that Lord basically says, look, guys, your best years are behind you. I mean, you guys got to stop looking at being superheroes. You guys got to basically just kind of look at the future and see what direction you want your lives to go in. Well, there's really no answers to be had here. And so what ends up happening is Blue Beetle basically turns his attention to Bruce Wayne. And that's really what's going to happen in the story. Blue Beetle is going to go from Justice League member to Justice League member, telling them what's going on. And none of them are really going to take him seriously. Keep in mind that when it came to Booster Gold and when it came to Blue Beetle, they were playing second fiddle. I mean, when people thought of the Justice League, when they thought of the world's greatest superheroes, they didn't think of Ted Kord. They didn't think of Blue Beetle. They didn't think of Booster Gold. I don't mean in terms of fans. I mean in terms of just society in the DC universe. And so because of that, they thought of, Batman and so on and so forth. And so, Ted Kord, I guess Blue Beetle, Booster Gold, they were background guys. They were second-rate guys. And even the Justice League looked at them that way to a degree. However, speaking with Batman and basically saying, hey, look, somebody's doing something. I mean, there's information that's going on, rumors about Dr. Light, so on and so forth. Again, all of that tying into Identity Crisis, Batman really kind of blows them off. But what we end up finding out is that because of the events of Identity Crisis, Batman had basically created this sort of autonomous system called Brother Eye. And what Brother Eye was designed to do was basically monitor the planet Earth. I mean, really kind of be one of these, Batman's eye in the sky, so to speak, to kind of make the Earth, I guess, a safer place. Now, again, we're going to find out later on in this video how it can be used for nefarious purposes. But again, jumping back over to Blue Beetle, in the present moment right now, investigating really the headquarters of Checkmate, he's coming across all these different files belonging to Batman, Superman, the Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. Keep in mind, this comes after Green Lantern Rebirth, investigating the Flash and so on and so forth. And there's all these files, all these dossiers, on them. And what these profiles basically do is they list their secret identities, their strengths, their weaknesses, all this information. So for those of you guys who read like Tower of Babel, where Batman was keeping detailed files on how to defeat the individual members of the Justice League, imagine that information, but expanded to include almost the entirety of the superhero community, or at least the most prominent members, as well as the various organizations that exist out there, Progene Tech, Star Labs, so on and so forth. And so again, because of this, what ends up happening is we actually find out that Kord, one of the I guess warehouses that was owned by Ted Kord, had basically been raided. It had stored several hundred pounds of kryptonite. And again, this was a major issue just simply because of the fact that if a person got a hold of this kryptonite, they could use it for any number of reasons on Superboy, Connor Kent, because remember, following the death of Superman, there was, Connor Kent during the reign of the Superman. He was a holdover. He was maintained by DC Comics. He's still around, and he actually has a really badass moment in Infinite Crisis when he fights Superboy Prime. It's pretty amazing. I love that fight. But what Blue Beetle does is he kind of reaches out to Oracle, says, we need to call everybody in. We need to find out who jacked this kryptonite. So we've got Dr. Fate, we got Power Girl, Hawk Girl, so on and so forth. But again, what this does is highlight the lack of trust between these different members of the Justice League team. And so because of that, a lot of individuals kind of look at Blue Beetle and say, look, we're just kind of doing this as a favor, but honestly, man, there's really nothing to go on here. You're kind of wasting your time. A lot of them don't really take him seriously. And one by one, slowly but surely, they all sort of begin to bail out. Now, of course, Hal Jordan appears before Blue Beetle and says, hey, look, my ring's picking up some very faint signatures of radiation. But what this tells us is that whoever it was that took this kryptonite did so with stealth in mind, that if some of the world's greatest superheroes, Power Girl with all her different abilities, Starfire with all her different abilities, Dr. Fate in the realm of magic, if all these different individuals cannot find any real trace of evidence to indicate who it was that took this kryptonite or where, well then suddenly Blue Beetle begins to lose credibility. He's the boy who who cried wolf. But with Hal Jordan on Blue Beetle's side and saying, look, I'm willing to help you, deal with this, it kind of bolsters the confidence of Blue Beetle. It makes him feel like he's less of a second stringer, and makes him feel like he has more of a place, or at least somebody out there is taking him seriously. Now, of course, when the question's asked, what happened to this kryptonite and where did it go? Superman makes his appearance. So that's one of the coolest things about this, because Blue Beetle looks at Superman and says, every time I see him, it's the first time. Every time I see him, no matter when I see him, no matter where I see him, no matter how many times I've seen him before, every time is the first time. His authority, the stance that he has, the fact that he's so large, the confidence that he exudes, it really makes Ted Kord kind of feel insignificant, but the fact that Superman is speaking to him and taking time to talk to him makes him feel important. And so really, it's one of these funny little moments, one of these funny little things in terms of how different people view the concept of the character of Superman. Not only that, Ted Kord actually starts tripping over his words. He starts getting nervous. His mouth dries up. He doesn't really know what to say. Superman says, calm down, relax, tell me what's happening. Now, of course, Blue Beetle explains everything that's going on with regards to the kryptonite that vanished. Superman takes this with the utmost concern and says, look, if there's 100 pounds of kryptonite running around out there, it's, for Superman and the various kryptonite-based individuals out there, it might as well be an atomic bomb. And so it's like that line from the movie Peacemaker. I'm not concerned about the guy who wants 10 nukes. I'm concerned about the guy who only wants one. And so because of this, it's Superman kind of saying, okay, look, this deserves a lot of attention. Now, of course, he races off, but then Blue Beetle's sort of accosted by these nonsensical villains and so on and so forth. Now, the funny thing about this, and this is why I love this story so much, is because on the surface, it seems woefully unimportant. It seems totally unimportant. In fact, it's almost over in the blink of an eye, in the sense that these guys are basically chased off by Booster Gold, who returns to help Blue Beetle. But we'll actually find out later on, this was extremely important. This was a very significant moment in this story. More so than that, again, this basically kind of sets the seeds for Villains United when we find out that Lex Luthor is working alongside Black Adam. He's working alongside Talia al Ghul. He's working alongside Dr. Psycho, Deathstroke, basically creating this new team of supervillains for the purpose of carrying out whatever missions or goals they intend to carry out. Again, a lot of this kind of sets the stage for some of the stories that are going to be coming out of this, some of the miniseries that lead into Infinite Crisis. But from this point, we jump forward, a little bit, by about a day and a half or so, 2.5 days, something like that. And we basically pick up with, Blue Beetle and Booster Gold sort of going through and trying to figure out what's going on. The reason for this is because of the fact that in Blue Beetle's mind, if someone was contracted to basically rob his place, rob this warehouse, then money had to have changed hands. And if money changed hands, then it could be traceable, because in the words of Blue Beetle, people don't just exchange money using suitcases anymore. It's all done digitally. Now, keep in mind, Blue Beetle is wildly intelligent in terms of what it is that he's capable of, but he also has a great deal of wealth to his name and has a lot of resources at his disposal. The problem is that in the middle of this whole investigation, when Booster Gold steps up to try to, get into this computer and trace these transactions, the whole thing explodes. The whole house is basically totally destroyed. Now, what this does is it sends Blue Beetle on a chase to find out who it was that destroyed this house. And the reason why is because of the fact that this damage also includes Booster Gold receiving third-degree burns on 40% of his chest. And so at this point, it's really become personal more so than business related. Now, of course, at this point, the investigations of Blue Beetle basically lead him to the Rock of Eternity. Now, the Rock of Eternity, at least as far as I'm aware, the Rock of Eternity is where the wizard Shazam resides. Keep in mind, Shazam is basically the wizard that bestowed Billy Batson with his powers and allowed him to become, Captain Marvel or Shazam or whatever you want to call him. But, this guy, the powers that this guy bestowed is the reason why Billy Batson can shout the word Shazam and turn into a superhero. The issue with this is that when it comes to the wizard Shazam, he has a great deal of knowledge on a lot of things that are going on. Keep in mind, this is all still in the era where there's only one singular universe, but a lot of this is kept cloak and dagger. We don't really know what's going on. The wizard Shazam speaks in a very cryptic way, saying things like, there's a lot unfolding at the moment. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. There are a lot of things that are taking place here. You're a man. You're not prepared for what's to come. And then essentially just kind of whisks him away and calls it a day. And that's really it here. And so again, going through these files and doing some investigations, really 8 hours until the present day, in the middle of Blue Beetle, I guess following his being teleported away, of course his ship is destroyed. And what it does is it leads to him being taken aboard the Justice League Watchtower. Now again, this is where he runs into Wonder Woman. And that's the other cool thing about this, is because with the character of Wonder Woman, writers tend to write her in a way to where she's either a warrior or she's a woman. She's never both. The great thing about this story is that we kind of get both aspects of her, in the sense that she's very calm, she's very welcoming, she has a very warm personality. She's not just like, blarg, let's go destroy stuff. She's not really like that in this particular story. And even Blue Beetle, in the context of the events, comments on that whenever Wonder Woman says someone's name, when she speaks to them, it's like she knows everything about your life. And what this is designed to do is kind of build off the work that's been done with Diana Prince, to kind of remind us that she is a character who is a warrior in every sense of the word, that she could probably kill Superman if it came down to it. But in the presence of friends, in the presence of people that she's familiar with, she's a friend. She's someone that you can count on, someone you can rely on. And so it's a great way to give us, both sides of who she is in terms of creating a cohesive character for her. The problem with this is that, where she basically says, hey, keep me abreast of your investigation, let me know what's going on, keep detailed files. It really seems to be more placation than anything else. Like, yeah, sure, I believe you. I mean, I trust you, man. It's okay. Just, keep me aware, keep me, make sure I'm informed, that kind of thing. But she doesn't really do anything to like go with him and help his investigation. This is compounded by the fact that as Booster Gold is making his way out of the Justice League Watchtower, he comes across Martian Manhunter, John Jones. And John Jones' response is, hey, look, Wonder Woman said that she may trust you, that she may believe you, but she's really a lot more trusting than she should be. Any superhero with their salt is going to believe that you're just full of crap, that you're just going on about nonsense. And so again, it's not really John Jones trying to be cruel. It's not him trying to be rude. It's him just kind of running over the fact of the situation. Because again, Martian Manhunter is very kind of like, hey, here's how things are. Like, I don't have time to worry about your feelings. Here is the fact of the situation. And that's really the naked truth. The naked truth here is that a majority of the superheroes out there do not consider Blue Beetle to be anyone of any real serious note. And what this is designed to do is kind of reflect the existing DC community, right? If I go out into a street and I show people a picture of Batman, I'm going to say, who is that? They're going to say, well, that's Batman. If I show them a picture of Superman, they'll say that's Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, so on and so forth. If I show them a picture of Blue Beetle, they're not going to have a clue who that is. I don't know, is that blue guy? I have no idea who that is. They're not going to know who he is. The fact that he's obscure to really the public at large, the non-comic book reading community at large, is a reflection of how he's viewed by the superhero community. The superhero community doesn't take him seriously. He's a small-time guy. He's a second stringer. You call Blue Beetle in when everybody else is dead, when there's no one left to fight. You just bring him off the bench and say, hey man, you got to get in there and you got to put up the good fight. People, the general public, view him the exact same way. Now, Blue Beetle fans will hit the roof if you tell them that Blue Beetle sucks. Walk up to a Blue Beetle fan and say, hey, I was reading about Blue Beetle recently and I gotta say, man, that guy sucks. They will freak. They will lose their absolute mind. Like, he's got a small fan base. I think Amazing Zero, we were talking about this in the Discord, he was like, Blue Beetle has a small fan base, but it is a hardcore, dedicated fan base. It is insane. But, as he's kind of going through, back where his home used to be, and he's kind of going through this whole issue, kind of struggling and trying to figure out his place, and, really asking the question, am I really just going on a wild goose chase? Am I just a dog chasing its tail? He then begins to realize that somebody's watching him. And the reason why is because he basically discovered what amounts to a small little camera or a small little monitoring device inside the goggles of his helmet. And so what he does is he races off to Booster Gold, tells him what's going on. Booster Gold tries to help, of course, with him sustaining injury. He can't really go, but Booster Gold basically collapses from his injuries, from the pain he's experiencing. He's put back to sleep by the nurses, and then Blue Beetle tells the nurse, he says, hey, look, you have to promise me something. Tell Booster Gold, no matter what happens, it's not his fault, that he's the best friend that Blue Beetle has ever had. And so this basically leads into the ending of the story, and it picks up with Blue Beetle following, or I guess arriving at checkmate, which really kind of brings us back to the beginning of the story. Now, with regards to him going through this database and going through all this information, what happens is we end up finding out the hidden hand behind all these things that have been happening is Maxwell Lord. And what ended up happening is that when Batman created Brother Eye, it was designed really with like the best intentions, or at least the best intentions in terms of like Batman, right? I mean, Batman's not like an altruistic guy. Batman's not like, hey, look, I really care about your thoughts and feelings. Batman's pretty far from that. But what ended up happening here is that the Checkmate organization, which was previously kind of a branch off of the US government, where it operated on behalf of the US government and carrying out, or really kind of serving as like a monitoring arm, was relaunched and retooled by Maxwell Lord for the purpose of hijacking Brother Eye and using Brother Eye as a means to monitor superheroes around the world. And so what Maxwell Lord wanted to do is basically say, hey, look, there's like 90, of all the superhero, I guess all the superpowered people out there, the 1.9 million people out there who have powers, 95% of them are nuisance powers, meaning that, they can barely use their telekinesis, or they can kind of read surface thoughts, or maybe they can teleport a little bit or something like that. They can't do anything outrageous, but there's the 5% that can do insane things, who can fly, who are invulnerable, who have super strength, super speed, who are a credible threat to any country they come across, not just a group of people, but a country. And Maxwell Lord's idea is to basically say, we're not going to allow our world to be ran by people with superpowers. We're going to to allow our world to be ran by humans, and we're going to control superheroes. Now, this is not Maxwell Lord doing this for the purpose of just saying, we really need a great safe world where superheroes are under control. This is a power-hungry Maxwell Lord. He's looking to use Checkmate, or really, use Brother Eye and Project OMAC as a way to basically control the world. I mean, that's really what this is. It's just kind of world domination. If you control Superman, if you control Wonder Woman, if you control the Green Lantern, the Flash, Aquaman, so on and so forth, you control the future of the planet, because all you have to do is send the Justice League into a country, and that country doesn't exist anymore. And so because of that, Maxwell Lord basically gives Blue Beetle a choice. He says, look, you can join me in this crusade. You can join me in this task, or you can stand against me. If you stand against me, you are going to die. Now, what he also does is he basically deploys one of his OMACs, these super powerful beings that are designed to really kind of counter the various powers of different individuals out there. For those of you guys who are familiar, and I don't know very many people who are, but for those of you guys who are familiar with like the old school Marvel UK Captain Britain stuff, think of this as like a kind of DC version of the Fury. I mean, it's not intrinsic in the sense that like the Fury was designed to counter every single superpower, but you guys understand what I'm saying in the sense that it was kind of like, this force of some kind. But the fact remains here that because of the fact that Blue Beetle chooses not to ally himself with Maxwell Lord shoots him in the head, just kills Blue Beetle on the spot, and that's the death of Ted Kord. Now, what this does is it sets the stage for later on down the line, which leads into the events of Infinite Crisis. The reason being is because the world is becoming a darker place. Now, on the surface, it does not seem like this has anything to do with Infinite Crisis, and I understand that in its entirety. However, the darker nature of these stories, because you'll notice these stories are dark, these stories are gritty, these stories are not designed to be happy and fluffy. They're in stark contrast to what you're seeing in DC Rebirth right now. The nature of the superhero community in the world at this moment in DC Comics with regards to this countdown to Infinite Crisis is the reason why Superboy Prime, why it is that Earth 3 Lex Luthor and Earth 2 Superman and Lois Lane show up in the world in the first place, is because to them, the world's darker. These are not superheroes. These are people who used to be superheroes, but they're basically villains now. There's no real difference between villains and heroes. This sets the stage for what goes on in the realm of Infinite Crisis. But again, all that'll make sense. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.